Hello and welcome to our first LinkedIn Live hosted by me, Amy Grilly from the 5 Hour Club, and we're being joined by Working Families today where we're going to discuss the future of family-friendly workplaces. For those that don't know us, the 5 Hour Club is a platform helping parents to find professional roles that work between school hours, known as the 5 Hour Workdays, which you might hear a little bit more about later. Working Families is the UK's national charity for working parents and carers, providing legal advice for families and support for employers who want to make a difference to them. Before we kick things off, I'd like to share the agenda, do a few introductions and a little bit of housekeeping. So today we're going to talk about what it means to be a family-friendly employer, as well as sharing more information about the new family-friendly workplace certification from Working Families. The family-friendly workplace certification is the first of its kind across the UK. Using global work and family standards, it recognises the organisations that are committed to embedding best practices and ways of working. It has wide-reaching benefits, enabling employers to assess their social impact, attract and retain talent, improve wellbeing outcomes, and drive a cultural change by raising the standards of family-inclusive employers. The Family-Friendly Workplace Certification Programme aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, thereby contributing to global social change. Evidence shows that family-friendly workplaces can have a huge impact on the wellbeing of employees and their families. In the UK, being employed doesn't offer protection against poverty, and access to fair, flexible work is one of the most effective routes for these families. So, Working Families has come together with founding and supporting employers to create family-friendly workplaces in the UK. They're aiming to develop a gold standard for employers to work towards, recognise the good work of organisations through the Family-Friendly Workplaces Certification Programme, and encourage continuous development to drive culture change and raise standards. So, to highlight what the future of family-friendly workplaces look like and why this is so important, we're going to hear from 4 brilliant speakers today. First of all, we're going to hear from Emma Walsh, who is the founder and CEO from Parents at Work in Australia and has been recognised globally as a pioneer in the development and implementation of family-inclusive workplace policy. For 2 decades, Emma has been a clear voice on the social, economic and business benefits of family-inclusive workplaces, advocating for the widespread implementation of parental leave and flexible workplace policies and practices to improve gender equality, child development and work-life wellbeing outcomes. Emma herself is a mum of 3, twin boys and a daughter, and she lives in Sydney, Australia, and is an author, international speaker, advocate and campaigner for improving parental leave rights for families. We're also going to hear from Joanne Waterworth, who is the Head of Employer Services at Working Families. She leads the team working with employers, providing insight, knowledge and practical interventions to help employers to develop family-friendly, flexible, high-performing, inclusive workplaces. Jo will share more information about the Family-Friendly Workplace Certification, explaining what it means and how you can get involved. And in between this, we're going to hear from 2 brilliant parents from the 5 Hour Club community whose careers have been positively impacted by finding family-friendly employers to work for. We're going to hear from Clare Leeks, who is a COO at Ecog, which is a sustainability consultancy that helps businesses embed a change in a way that's good for the planet and their business. As a mum of teens, she'll share how progression in her career came to a standstill after having her children and has only recently skyrocketed as a senior leader after she found a truly family-friendly employer with an entire team that works a 5-hour workday around their families. Finally, we're going to hear from Naomi, Head of Resourcing and Information at Kenton Medway NHS Social Care and Partnership Trust, KMPT for short. And after changing career and qualifying as a teacher during maternity leave, she realised that the education sector was not the most family-friendly workplace, unfortunately, and so returned to her career in recruitment, where she is now thriving as a senior leader in the NHS. Naomi will share the ways in which KMPT have supported her career and her family and why they wanted to be the first in our 5-hour workday pilot. So just a little bit of housekeeping. If you would like to ask any of our speakers questions throughout, please do so in the comments below and we'll answer as many of them as we can in the Q&A at the end of the conversation. And we will be recording this, so if you're not able to stay to the end, please feel free to ask the questions anyway and we'll answer them in the comments for you. So I think it's time to get started. So we're going to start with Emma Walsh, who is our first speaker, and she is the founder and CEO of Parents at Work. Hello, Emma.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Amy, and to the other panellists. Great to be having this conversation. And I guess my role is helping frame it up, the backdrop and the context as to why family-friendly workplaces are so critical, not only to the well-being of employees and their families, which may seem obvious, but to share the vital role they play in really promoting societal and economic prosperity for everyone, business included. And really there is no doubt that societies and economies around the world really are facing increasing friction. That friction between the demand for productivity and increasing care needs of their current and future workforce. And workplace policies really must evolve to rise to meet that challenge. Not only do family-friendly policies contribute to better health and well-being for families and developmental outcomes for children, evidence shows, as you were talking about as you open this, that policies like this improve workforce productivity, they enhance an organisation's ability to attract and motivate and retain employees. But family-friendly policies play a crucial role in also reducing gender inequality, and I'm sure we will talk about that a lot today. I know that the absence of such policies really do disproportionately affect women. We know this. They often bear the greater burden of caregiving responsibilities, and this really undermines their career progression and economic empowerment unless they are able to engage in family-friendly workplaces. So by investing in these policies, organisations can support progress towards achieving gender equality while creating environments where employees can thrive, what we would say, at home and at work. And we know the two are vital because they're inextricably linked now. We know that, work is in our homes 24/7 pretty much now, thanks to smart devices. So the ability where the blend, to separate work and family life just isn't what it was decades ago. So unfortunately, the development of family-friendly workplace policies requires a collaborative approach. It's not something that one individual can solve or one organisation can solve. It needs to have a united approach to integrating efforts from governments, private sector and civil society to crack it. This collaboration ensures that policies and provisions such as workplace culture, that's really supportive, becomes inclusive, that we have evidence-based return on investment, and that we have an alignment between standards that are offered across workplaces. Because one of the challenges that many employers can face is, well, what does good look like? What would a good family-friendly policy around parental leave or flexibility look like that will drive productivity outcomes as well as wellbeing outcomes for individuals? And we know progress is too slow. Greater investment in workplace family-friendly policies are urgently needed. And in 2019, so just before COVID hit, UNICEF globally launched a campaign to create family-friendly workplaces around the world. In response to this, the Family Friendly Workplaces Certification Program was developed in Australia by Parents at Work in collaboration with UNICEF Australia to accelerate progress, to create real change and recognise a commitment to family-inclusive ways of working. We developed global work and family standards in line with a social impact framework to support organisations in measuring and communicating the social value of their provisions and really encouraging commitment to continuous improvement. These standards, which I know others will share more about on the call today, but they're designed to educate employers on the importance of embracing family-friendly policies and practices, certify employers that meet the minimum standard and recognise those that go above and beyond. But perhaps most importantly, they provide a framework and a guideline to employers that really foster a family-inclusive culture. They also help, the standards help share evidence-based best practice from around the world, and they support policymakers in formulating improved policies and practices. So this work has been vital to supporting working families in Australia, where really this program is piloted. I thought it might be useful to share a few striking statistics that highlight where the pressure points are, particularly in Australia. But I think this is also relevant globally. I know that some of this research is very relevant to the UK as well. Australia does have one of the highest childcare costs amongst all OECD countries. 16% of household income is spent on childcare compared to the OECD average of just 9%. We rank low on paid parental leave, one of the least generous nations. We offer just 22 weeks of paid parental leave compared to the OECD average of 52 weeks. We know that Australian mothers work part-time, the majority part-time. In fact, we have one of the highest part-time workforces in the world compared to men. And by 2030, 1 in 5 workers will be aged 55 plus. Why does this matter? Because caregiving needs are going up, both at the parenting stage but in the latter stage of life as well. And actually in Australia, it might be surprising for you to know, but 1 in 2 Australians live with a chronic health condition, amplifying the need and importance of supportive workplace policy when it comes to caregiving. We know that the stress, based on our research that we've done, that women find trying to balance work and family commitments is on the rise. When we did the research in 2019 compared to the research in 2024, we found that it was up 23%, which was concerning given there was obviously so much effort put into flexible working during the COVID years, but we've seen an increase in stress in the last 5 years. Experienced by women, but this is also true of men. Men's stress has also gone up. We know that 1 in 2 men and women say that and agree that workers' commitment to their job is questioned when they use family-friendly work arrangements, and 56% say it's more acceptable for women to use family-friendly work options than men. So that just gives you a snapshot, I guess, of the state of work and family in Australia, and perhaps some of these you can relate to in the UK, and I look forward to having this conversation on the panel today. We're delighted to be working with Working Families to expand the Family Friendly Workplaces mission, certification and campaign to employers in the UK, and are delighted to have this opportunity to talk. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks so much, Emma. That's great. I mean, it's so interesting to hear the similarities that we have between the UK and Australia, and lots of those statistics in the right way. And it sounds like you're already doing such a fabulous job for working families and caregivers in Australia. I think that's a really good point to make, that actually it's not just for those with young children, but also those who are looking after their elderly parents as well. So thank you. So hopefully we can replicate all of the good work that you're doing over there in Australia and do some of the same work over here in the UK too. So next up, we're going to hear from Clare Leeks, who is the COO of Ecog, and she's going to share the reason why working a 5-hour workday works for her career and her family. So hi, Clare.
Hello. So I think kind of my story, I think, is probably very similar to a lot of people, certainly since I shared it via LinkedIn when we were sort of doing your I Belong campaign. The amount of people that sort of reached out and were like, it resonates so much with me. I mean, I was working in marketing and communications, and I had been working in the charity sector, and then I sort of went off and sort of did some consultancy, and I was working on a project and discovered that I was pregnant and kind of shared that. And then I think it was probably only a couple of weeks later when suddenly they were like, oh, you know, we're changing the way that the project's going, so thanks for your time, but no thanks. So that was kind of my first sort of insight into how my working world was about to change. And then after my son was born, I realised really quickly that actually I was somebody who really wasn't made to be a stay-at-home mum, as much as I kind of had envisaged at some point that that was kind of how my life would go. I realised that I really needed to work for my mental health. Like it wasn't just about kind of the money side to it. I needed more. I needed to keep working. So I started looking for flexible work, and there really just wasn't very many options. I mean, this was like 12 years ago. So I was fortunate enough that I had a friend who owned a floristry business. So I went and helped out there for a couple of years, and I had my sort of my second child at that point. And then kind of got what I considered to be like the holy grail of work in a primary school, in the primary school that my child was going to. And it was like, oh, all my prayers have been answered. But I kind of discovered that I suppose, a bit like Naomi, that actually when you work in a school environment, I wasn't a teacher, but I was a HLTA, and I took on quite a lot of responsibility. I ended up being head of pastoral care. And, yes, I had that initial growth, which was brilliant. But then I sat down after I'd been there for about 6 years. I sat down with the head and I was like, right, what are my options? My kids are getting a bit older now. I've got a bit more flexibility. Like, what can we do next? And she was like, it's kind of there. There isn't really anything. And that blew my mind. I was like, this is it then. This is kind of where I'm going to have to be for the next however many years that I'm going to be working. So I had to really reflect on that and had conversations with my husband, and I kind of started to explore the marketplace and found that the reality of it was that any experience that I'd had previously was almost obsolete, because I didn't want to necessarily go back at the level that I had been, but to kind of apply for junior roles, it was like, well, no, you're kind of overqualified for this. But then I don't know whether, there was an element of my confidence. I think having not done it for 12 years, I was definitely not in the same place that I was mentally, but just also being overlooked for those opportunities that were higher level because I'd been out of the marketplace for so long. And it just made you feel really invisible. I just didn't know where I fitted in. And so I had to kind of almost go back to where I had been when you first leave school. And I was like, right, what do I do? Okay, well, I ended up having to go and work for free in the summer holidays at other people's businesses to get experience outside of the education sector. And that actually really helped. It massively boosted my confidence and made me realise that I was still very capable of doing the things that I had done previously. And so that sort of led me to, and the timing was all very, perfect, because I then saw your post, Amy, on Instagram and immediately looked online and saw the job that was posted with Ecog and applied. And as a process, it was very different. The way that Gemma, the founder, approaches how we work is just so different to any other organisation I've ever worked for. We're a startup, but she's very focused on ensuring that all the staff who work for us are able to have proper work-life balance and parental balance, carer balance. We do operate a sort of 5-hour working day, but I actually think that most of us we just work. I don't consider myself to be a part-time worker in that capacity that many people do. We do what we've got to do because we're all really passionate about what we do. And Gemma trusts us, and I think that's really the key when it comes to working in this environment, is you put a lot of trust in the people that you work with. And I think, and I hope that other people can kind of see that it really is, it's about recruiting people who align with your values, because that's when it's going to work, because everybody's on the same page and everybody wants the same thing. I don't think working parents, they're not after just like quick money. There's still passion there. There's still so much talent out there with all of these incredible parents who just need an opportunity, and they just need a business to turn around and say, yes, we're prepared to kind of put our money where our mouth is, really commit to doing something that gives people the opportunity to thrive again, because that's all anybody wants, the opportunity to work and feel like themselves. I think, Emma, you're so right when it comes to talking about the impact on mental health and well-being. It's so important for people to have those outlets to, and it's, don't get me wrong, there are people that don't necessarily want to, and that's okay too. So, but just allow an environment that gives people the option, I think, is really, really important. And parents, just back yourself. Like, you've done it before and you can do it again. It's really just giving them the opportunity to do it.
Oh, that's fabulous, Claire. Thank you so much for sharing your story, because I know your story resonated so much with so many who felt the same, that felt that they were stuck and they didn't have that opportunity. And I'm so glad that you found that place with Ecog and that you're now thriving, because like you say, it's about your confidence does get knocked. You do sometimes feel invisible, and you shouldn't, because you've got all this experience behind you. And then when you get in the right place, in the right place that really recognises you as a parent or a carer, or your additional needs are aside from work, and shows that actually it's all about trust, isn't it? It's all about if you're there, you've got this purpose, especially when you become a parent, your perspective changes. But often you really value the time that you're at work and that you're away from the children, so you work really hard. And that's what I think we want to encourage employers to do, is think about the individuals, that what they're bringing to the table after they become parents. Actually, it's a lot more than maybe they might have got before. So thank you so much for that, Claire. I'm really great to hear that you found somewhere where you can thrive now. So thank you. So next up, we're going to hear from Jo from My Families, who's going to share more information about what the Family Friendly Workplace Certification Programme looks like and how you can get involved. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you very much for having me this morning. It's lovely to be here. So I'm just going to share a little bit more information on the Family Friendly Workplaces certification in the UK. We launched on the 31st of March with a group of founding partners, supporting partners and advocacy partners. And the founding and supporting partners are the trailblazers of this certification in the UK. So, as Emma will have mentioned, family-friendly workplaces strive to reduce the tension that exists between work and family by embedding and promoting policies and practices that genuinely support employees to thrive at work and at home. And we've covered some of this information already, but I thought it might just be helpful to go over it again. So why do family-friendly workplaces matter, and why should businesses take part in this certification? Well, as Claire just mentioned, if you support employees, employees thrive and your business thrives. So it would lead to happier, healthier and more productive workplaces. And also having these policies in place for parents and carers ensure that particularly women don't have to choose between career growth and caregiving responsibilities. They will stay with you, they will progress their career, and that can lead to a reduced gender pay gap. So it's a catalyst for gender equality. And investing in family-friendly policies can contribute to economic prosperity, social well-being and sustainable growth. So with better workplaces, we can create a stronger society. And that's why this global movement is so important. And there's also a compelling business case for being a family-friendly workplace. So employees who feel supported at work and at home are more engaged, committed and effective. So you'll see a boost in productivity and engagement. Standing out as an employer of choice for families allows you to attract and retain top talent. And also will allow you to attract a more diverse workforce. And with a diverse workforce, we see a better business outcome. And there are tangible financial benefits too. So family-friendly workplaces that we've worked with have reported savings across the business, including things like reduced travel costs, reduced costs for office space, sick leave and recruitment. So there are lots of really good reasons to take part. And as Emma mentioned earlier, the certification is based on a set of global work and family standards, and they've been developed in line with a social impact framework to support organisations to measure and communicate the social value of their provisions and encourage commitment to continuous improvement. So there are 6 core categories that the certification covers: flexible work, parental leave, leadership culture, because we know this is key to embedding family-friendly policies, family well-being, and that's supporting the well-being of your employees as well as their families, family care, and measurement, which allows businesses, organisations to review, assess and improve their offering for employees. So these are the foundations of the certification for the self-assessment and the certification questionnaire, which I will come on to, and they provide a best practice framework for employers to work towards. So on to the actual process of certification. It's pretty straightforward. The first step is to complete a self-assessment, and that's a short online survey with questions covering the 6 global standards that I've just mentioned there. It's open to any employer in the UK, and you can access it through the Family Friendly Workplaces UK website and the QR code, which I'm going to show at the end of this presentation. And through this self-assessment, it'll allow you to determine your organisation's eligibility to go forward to the certification questionnaire. So if you pass and meet the minimum standard, you will then be invited to take the certification questionnaire. And again, this is an online survey, an online questionnaire, going into a little bit more detail in the 6 global standards. And this will help you understand how you measure up against the global work and family standards. You'll receive a report with insights and recommendations as to how you can improve, and you'll be able to discuss this with an expert relationship manager from Working Families. And on the back of this, your organisation will create an action plan for further improvement. Based on the recommendations in the report, you will choose which actions you'd like to prioritise for your business for the next 12 months. And once this is complete and signed off by a senior sponsor within your business, you'll receive your certification and a badge as a family inclusive workplace. And then you'll be easily identifiable to employees looking for work as a family friendly employer. So the next step is pretty simple. Go onto the Family Friendly Workplaces UK website, have a look at all the information that is on the website. Please take the self-assessment. And my wonderful colleagues in the Employer Services team here at Working Families are here to help and guide you through the process. So please do be in touch if you'd like to take part. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks so much, Jo. That's really helpful and really interesting to hear the process. I think there'll be a lot of employers watching who'd be very interested because hopefully they're already very family friendly already. So it'd be great for them to do the self-assessment and see how family friendly they are. Okay, all of the details about how to get involved will be at the end in the webinar notes. So please take a look if you're interested. So finally, it's time to hear from one more parent, Naomi Corner, who is the Head of Resourcing and Information at KMPT. And she's going to share how her NHS Trust is leading the way to become a more family-friendly organisation and share her experience. So welcome, Naomi.
Thanks so much, Amy, and thanks to everyone for being here today. Truly feel honoured to be sharing this platform with such amazing, inspirational people. So for myself, I suppose my story really resonates quite closely with what Claire explained in terms of her experience of education. I originally had a career in recruitment, started agency side, and then went on to work for a construction manufacturer where I looked after resourcing and inclusion for the UK and Ireland. And I remember saying to my boss while I was pregnant, I'm going to be back here in 3 months. Famous last words. And she kind of laughed at the time. She was a parent and knew that that was unlikely to be the case and was absolutely right. And my first daughter was born. And she was born half deaf, and it really floored me for quite a while, mainly because I didn't really understand, one, whether or not there were going to be any difficulties for her and how I could best support her, but two, wanting to be around for her and not be that absent parent who had a high-powered career and not really knowing how to balance both. So I decided to completely U-turn my career and retrain and qualify as a teacher. So I worked as a teaching assistant while doing my degree, and then did my final year of teacher training, which was full-time. And within that time also had my second daughter. It was a lot. There was a lot to do. And I could just about manage it when I was working as a teaching assistant, but it was still a challenge, still trying to make all of those elements work and do a degree in the evenings. And it was exhausting, but I was getting through it. And I had a really, really supportive school I was working with. And I then had to go to an alternative educational establishment, to another school, to do my final year of teacher training. And it was a real eye-opener. So I needed somewhere that was salaried so that I could pay nursery fees, and the closest was 45 minutes from home. So that meant that I was leaving the house every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting home at best at 6:45 at night. So I was seeing my children, they go to bed at 7 and get up at 7. So I was seeing them for 15 minutes a day. I'd say goodnight to them, and then I'd work till midnight every night. And on my final day of qualifying, I interviewed for the NHS, and it was a real strange one for me because my previous school, who I'd loved working for, had offered me a position, and I was really excited about going back there. But I also had this nervousness thinking, I remember my deputy head at my teacher training final year placement saying to me, oh, well, it's just part of the job. It's not expected for you to have a life outside of work. And I think the real nail in the coffin for me was my daughter was in reception. It was her first sports day, and I asked to go. I had my own class, and it was an absolute no way. And I just thought, how can an establishment that focuses on needing parents to be supportive then not offer the same opportunities to their staff? So that was the real, I suppose, nail in the coffin for me. And I started to have these doubts and interviewed with my current trust KMPT, and just got this amazing sense that the world had moved on a little bit. So COVID had happened in that time. All of a sudden, hybrid working was a thing. And I thought, okay, maybe actually I can still have a demanding career and I can still fit around my family. But I was really worried about school holidays. I didn't understand how parents could manage that. And I remember still being very much on the fence. And I spoke to my current boss when she offered me the role. And I explained my dilemma with school holidays. And she asked me if I'd considered annualised hours, which effectively means that I accrue additional annual leave every week by working an extra 2.5 hours. So that extra 2.5 hours goes into a pot, which basically means that I get now 10.5 weeks holiday a year. So not all of the holidays off, but it allows business continuity, and it also enables me to be a mum, which is just incredible. And actually my boss is very special in her unique outlook, and I felt so privileged to have that conversation with her, and for her to think like that as someone who didn't have children herself, but was totally open to the fact that in order to recruit talent she needed to consider an alternative option. And I think that's one of the key takeaways for me, really, and the reason that I wanted to get involved with the 5 Hour Club is because I think there's so much untapped potential out there. I know there are social media groups with millions of education professionals who are desperate to get out of the profession because they are so overworked, and they don't have the opportunity because perhaps they didn't have a previous career. I felt like I was really fortunate in the sense that I could go back into something I'd done before. But it doesn't just go for educational professionals. There's so many different career pathways which people have had to put on hold to be a parent. And I really want to be at the forefront and the first NHS trust to champion the fact that there are other opportunities out there. And we all pay lip service to flexible working, and we all have a flexible working policy, but people don't know what to ask for. They don't know what it means. I speak about my annualised hours to people sometimes, and they don't have any sense of what that looks like. So I think we need to be more open about what opportunities there are for flexible working, and really give employees a platform to not be afraid to ask or think that they're going to be viewed differently. And that's going to open up a world of talent of all of these parents who have had to put their amazing capability to less use because they're unable to access career opportunities. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Naomi. It always astounds me how, your determination every time I hear your story, how you went from one career, you retrained through maternity leave, and then you've gone back and are now thriving as a senior leader. And I think it just shows your grit and resilience. But I think that's true for so many parents, that just because we become parents doesn't mean our ambitions disappear. So thank you for sharing that. And I think thank you for sharing all of the wonderful ways that KMPT are now pushing forward to be more family inclusive and family friendly. Even just like you say, the small changes like recognising the benefits that really help parents, like annualised hours, and highlighting those things that you're already doing but maybe people don't know about is a really key thing, I think, for other employers to look at. It's not about making these big changes, it's about recognising the things that they can do, very small, tangible things that will help parents as an individual and for their families. So thank you so much for sharing that, and it's a pleasure to have you as part of our pilot, so thank you for that. So we're going to take a look now. So if you've got any questions, I'm just going to hand over. We have one question, and it says, where do part-time roles or remote roles to support that get advertised? It says there seems to be a big gap for part-time and hybrid remote roles for this. And I would open it up to the group. Actually, I think I can answer that in some ways. I know there are lots of flexible job boards out there. We do share, we call them 5 hour work days, 5 hour work day roles. It's essentially our roles up to 25 hours a week, which you could say are part-time. But as Claire mentioned, actually, when you are working in these types of roles, no matter how many hours you work, it's all about the output, isn't it? So you can find some part-time remote hybrid roles on 5 Hour Careers job board. And I know there are plenty of other flexible roles out there. I know that NHS, you've got some nice hybrid remote roles out there as well now. So it's worth having a look, in particular in the careers that maybe you've got experience in before, and selecting the filters to see part-time, hybrid, remote, and seeing if there is any. We know there are very few at this point. It sounds like in Australia, part-time work is a lot more open and that it's a lot more prevalent. So hopefully we can create that opportunity for parents over here in the UK. It'd be great to hear from you, Emma, in terms of part-time work and how that's had an impact on mothers, particularly returning back to the workforce.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily that part-time work is more prevalent. It's just that that's what we see most working mothers return to. A lot of them are wanting, as we've heard from Naomi and Clare, the ability to manage work and family life, and they've not felt that that's been possible to do a full-time job load. So they have looked for or engineered part-time work opportunities, and potentially too because they're managing the bulk of the caring load. And I think that's what part of the challenge is. It's not necessarily a shared load with their partner. But on the finding flexible roles front, my experience in Australia and also internationally, it's rare to see part-time roles specifically advertised. Many of them are referral based, friends of friends recommending people, or the role is advertised as the role, and depending on who applies for it, then there is a negotiation that potentially takes place between the individual candidate and the employer, asking if it's possible to go part-time, and then a part-time arrangement is potentially made. So it is difficult for employees wanting to seek out flexible ways of working if there's no clear signal as to whether a job can be in fact done part-time or not. So some employers are doing a great job in saying, we support flexible work on each and in an individual job ads. But this is why we think family-friendly workplace certification is so important, because what that does, it becomes a beacon and a signal when employers publicly announce they are a certified family-friendly workplace. We think not just parents, but any employee who cares about being able to balance work and family life is able to see that that organisation is someone that they could at least speak to about what flexible work options may exist, or apply for a role with them and comfortably ask that question, knowing that they have been certified, and that's clearly something that they're happy to be loud and proud about. So I think that's partly why the Family Friendly Workplaces accreditation has been so important, to have that badge that people can see, that that's the place that they can comfortably go and apply for a role.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we say. And that's why we're so behind this certification, because from our point of view, when we're looking for roles, it's very difficult. It's particularly when they say, full-time and flexible working, it becomes a barrier for parents when they don't know at what point to ask for that flexibility. Do they ask before the interview, after? They don't want to have a bias against them. So what we like to do is be as transparent as possible in all of our job posts. We always share the actual salary for the roles. We share the number of hours. We're very clear, because in that way, we hope to take down as many barriers for parents. But it's about asking other employers to do the same, and maybe they're not quite a 5-hour workday, but recognising that transparency will open up your talent pool. It's not going to close it down. It's actually going to broaden it to people who might not want to ask for that flexibility. So thank you so much for sharing that. And hopefully, by having these conversations and having that badge of approval, it will make our job a lot easier to see those family-friendly workplaces who are the ones to go to. Another option we say is, create a business case for yourself. Look at your experience. If you're already working in a role and you want to go back after maternity part-time, then create a business case for yourself. Look at the experience you're bringing. Look at the additional skills you've learned as a parent. Put that forward to your employer and say, this is why I would like to work part-time, but this is what I can do in that time, and I know I can, create the same output. So hopefully those things will help you when looking for part-time roles. We do have one more question that's come in. So what companies who are super flexible do help navigate the decision-making the process in terms of the working style schedule that's working for them? They often don't know what to ask for. Maybe Naomi or Emma, you could give us some insight about what parents should be asking for when they do go and they're looking for those sort of family-friendly employers?
So I think for me, the key is that there are so many different opportunities. There are things like term time working. There's part-time, but not as you know it, so you could do it over a couple of weeks. There's things like compressed hours, where you could potentially do longer hours in certain days and shorter hours or no hours on other days. I think the key is really, for me, when I was looking and thinking about getting out of teaching and wanting to return to the workplace, it was, what do I need? And actually, yes, my ideal job was probably term time only, 9:30 till 2:30, and paying me still a decent salary and valuing the work that I was doing. However, I mean, there's always got to be compromises, right? You've got to think about actually what is it that I could give? What could I juggle? And actually what is feasible for me? And work backwards from there. And I think the key is honesty, because actually sometimes it can be really scary having those conversations with employers. But for me, I would much rather, as an employer, someone have that conversation and we can have that discussion than, or even for employers, what would be amazing is if employers were asking that question and actively seeking out flexible workers and saying, what can we do for you? What's going to make your life easier? But for those employers who are still on that journey or who aren't quite there yet with those sorts of questions, actually, I think you have to articulate what it is that you need and work it through with your potential employer, because not doing so is not going to make you happy. It's going to make it strained, and potentially they're not going to get the best out of you. And I think that's the real key. And as Emma has mentioned, actually, when we think about preparing a business case, think about the benefits and what you can bring, what you can offer, and why this is still going to work for the employer. Because it's not cut and dried. Nothing is cut and dried, and someone might advertise something full time. That doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other opportunities. And actually, I find it really curious in the NHS that we have so many jobs for 37.5 hours a week. I mean, who knew that everything done had to be done in 37.5 hours a week? I mean, I think that just shows that we really need to open people's eyes and be brave and have those conversations. But yeah, start with what you need, work back from there, and think about what would be the things you could compromise on.
No, that's really helpful, Naomi. I think you're right. I think it's looking at the individual needs. And if you're lucky, you're going to, we're going to find these family-friendly employers who will be asking those questions. It sounds like, Claire, that's the experience you had when you were applying for that you were having that two-way conversation from the beginning. But if you're the one having to bring it forward, then it's about bringing it forward to see the benefits on both sides. Because let's face it, flexibility does work both ways, and it has to for it to be a long-term, sustainable career opportunity, as it being short-term. So thank you for that. Okay, I think that's about time for all of our questions now. I'm going to say thank you to all of our speakers for joining us and for sharing what the future of family-friendly workplaces looks like. And if you are an employer and would like to know whether you are family-friendly, you can go over to the familyfriendlyworkplace.co.uk website, where you can take your self-assessment and you can go from there. So thank you so much to Working Families for hosting and for all of our speakers. And thank you for joining us on the other side. We look forward to seeing more of our family-friendly workplaces, hopefully in the UK, in the very near future. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.